Det finns bara krig och livet är kamp på ofärdens tid.
This is frankly not an easy review to make. Not because I am in any way conflicted over how I feel about the book in question, but more because I know how popular Graham McNeill's writings are with the fandom. Me? I have a, shall we say, complicated relationship with Mr. McNeill. There are times, like when he wrote A Thousand Suns or The Last Church, when he's bloody glorious. And then there's things like Fulgrim, when I just want to choke the kilt-wearing hack. I say this knowing full well how popular Fulgrim the novel is, but that is not the subject of today. I'm saving that one for later. Graham McNeill's writing, to me, is unbelievably uneven. Dan Abnett's and Arne Dembski-Bowden's writings are fairly smooth rides. Arne Dembski-Bowden made like his mopey Night Lords a little too much, and Dan Abnett's got a tendency of late to try to turn the Imperium of Mankind into Space Britain, complete with steam-powered spaceships. And it's annoying like all theft, but overall those two deserve the praise they get for their writing, because it's competent, it's easy to read, it's something about literature, it's just flow. Abnett may toss you words and nomenclature you never heard of before, but it flows so smoothly, so it's very seldom it feels like you need some sort of thesaurus or dictionary at the end of the book just to understand what he's writing. McNeill can, as said, one moment produce outright genius like The Lost Church, and the next moment try to have me, the reader, believe that a Primarch doesn't recognize the voice in his head as something that may sort of be kind of evil, and that picking up an obviously worshipped item in a temple full of copulating snake people is not a good thing to do. Okay. Calm down. Fulgrim will get its just desserts some other day, and I haven't even touched upon the sometimes utterly hilarious word repetitions that McNeill can come up with. I can't give any direct examples right now, but just believe me when I say that there were parts in The Outcast Dead when I laughed my ass off because the writing was just plain funny. And it's disconcerting that the editors didn't pick up on these things. But today we are talking about something that Graham McNeill helped create in a very, very real manner, namely the Iron Warriors. And I'm not lying, Graham McNeill helped flesh out pretty much everything about the Iron Warriors in the early aughts. They used to be a very bare-bones thing until Graham McNeill and Andy Chambers and Pete Haynes in particular, because he wrote the Index Astartes article on them, when they came along to write the new background fluff, and that came just prior to the fondly remembered and utterly broken 3.5 edition of the Chaos Spaceman Codex. And yes, it was broken like heck and was one of the reasons that 4th edition was released. And the Iron Warriors were one of the primary reasons behind the breaking of 3rd edition Warhammer 40k. If you played Warhammer 40k back in those days, you were stamped as just as cheesy and as the yellow in your acid stripes. 4 basilisks, people. 4 basilisks. Funnily enough, McNeill has gotten recent competition in regards of having the most influence on the Iron Warriors fluff, thanks to one short story by Rob Sanders. And this kind of plays into how I sometimes think Graham McNeill is a glorious hack, but more on that later. You see, not long after Graham McNeill wrote the Chaos Spaceman Codex, the 3.5 Codex, and a few other things like that, he got his hands into the Black Library and gave us the Uriel Ventress novels, Nightbringer and Warriors of Ultramar. At about the same time, he also wrote Storm of Iron, which for its time was kind of a game changer. Ventress and McNeill's villain protagonist, Honsu, finally met in Dead Sky Black Sun, according to the edicts of Dan Abnett's first and only law of complete verisimilitude, and the rest is the history we're going to take a partial look at here. I say partial as we're only going to delve into the Iron Warriors omnibus, and for many different reasons I haven't read the Ultramarines omnibuses, but I may at some point in the future. I've read summaries of them. Oh, and spoilers. Storm of Iron. This is the only novel in the omnibus, and marks the start of Honsu's career as a Warsmith, although he gets elevated to that position at the end of the story. The plot is pretty damn simple when you look at it. The Iron Warriors land on the planet of Hydrocodatus to claim something in a fortress. Is something they aren't told what it is until towards the very end. I mean, it's good to have a mystery, but it's some hinting would have been nice. There are some nice twists in the plot along the way, with the obvious traitors among the Imperial Defenders revealed at the end on a subplot that was actually pretty well thought out. The Iron Warriors win. And that was kind of a big thing back in the day. The Iron Warriors, the bad guys, actually winning. Unheard of. Stories are told, some of them from Graham McNeill himself, that when he pitched the synopsis idea to the Black Library, the editors basically went like, you can't do this, people will go nuts, you can't have the bad guys win. But he was like, you wait, they will love this, they'll eat it up. And sure enough, he was completely and utterly correct. But you see, my problem with the story here is that everybody dies. Well, not everybody, but almost all. What we're left with are sketches of people instead of actual characters. Kruger, the Berserker captain, is the most obvious example, as he gets off very early on, and as I said, there would be spoilers. And to complicate matters, Honsu, our protagonist, is kind of a non-entity too. I mean, sure, just like Marduk, he's ambitious and whatnot, but he's, unlike Marduk, he's also kind of, sort of, dumb. And not in the silent way. Oh god, if he had just been dumb in the silent way. But no, here's the thing, he's dumb in the idiot kind of way. And first Captain Forex actually calls him out on this to illustrate the Warsmith of this grand company that's invading Hydrocodatus is changing. And sure, this book was written before the lore retcon about Chaos Marines perceiving time differently from the Imperium, because lol warp. So Honsu and Forex have actually fought the long war almost as long, and both have fought it for several thousands of years. And Honsu doesn't know what the demonic ascension is. He doesn't know what it means to become a demon prince. He's never heard of it even. He's just like utterly incapable of grasping the concept that the gods might elevate you to immortality. And this is our protagonist. He's been around just as long as Marduk, I think, more or less as long as Marduk, and he knows jack and shit about demonhood. Now, Forex on the other hand, has, and up until the beginning of the story basically, become so jaded by the long war that he practically has no emotions left. He finally feels his ambition rekindle when he realizes that the Warsmith ascending to demonhood means that he's probably going to be whisked away into the warp for a little while, and that means a lot of good things for Forex. As a follower, it means that he's, as first captain, he's the next one in line for leadership, for becoming Warsmith. And sadly he gets off within the last few pages of the book. He dies gloriously. He fights a warhound titan and nearly wins. But you see, that's my other problem. You see, apart from Forex, there are practically no character development in the book. Guardsman Hawk has a bit of character development, but the vast majority of them change not at all. This is problematic as regards to especially Honsu, as he becomes the main character in the series. He's the villain protagonist. Here's a clue. Saying Honsu changes, saying that he has changed by the end of, say, the Battle of Calth, doesn't make it so. Honsu is exactly the same in the aftermath of the Battle for Calth as he is in Storm of Iron. The book also, because it was written in 2002, it's starting to nicely show its age, being one of the earliest Graham McNeill wrote, and shows in so many ways and places, but it starts as enjoyable, and the more I think about it, it's blends together into this greyish mass of heavy artillery fire, which is massively ironic when you consider the theme of the story. As many people have pointed out about this book, I actually find myself sympathizing with Imperial Defenders rather than cheering for the Iron Warriors. And it has a lot to do with all of them being so utterly unlikable as people, that they're these horrible, horrible monsters, and there's not a single sympathetic trait in them. So Storm of Iron, at the end of the day, the Iron Warriors, I mean, we are no closer to knowing what they are beyond more spiky Chaos Marines that tend to use a lot of heavy artillery and excel at siege work. There's very little Iron Warrior characterization about them. There's nothing that really makes them stand out from all the others. The next story is named The Enemy of My Enemy, and it's a short story which details what happened to some of the slaves that were collected at the end of Storm of Iron when they were shipped back to Medrengard. And it serves as a kind of bridge between Storm of Iron and Dead Sky Black Sun. We get introduced to Ardaric Vance, the renegade Raven Guard, who shows up in Honsu's Warband and later stories. But Enemy of My Enemy it has some incredibly nice set pieces like the demonic train in it. That's pretty awesome, but beyond that, showing some of the utterly alien landscape of Medrengard and how it can basically drive you insane just to think about it, there's not very much remarkable about this story. It's barely a year since I read the omnibus, and I really can't remember anything beyond the demon train. Nothing really. The next story is the Heraclitus Effect, and we follow Honsu and his merry band of no-gooders. That is the Grendel, Vance, and the newborn clone thingy that they decided to lug around. And they're after vengeance, after they entered Dead Sky Black Sun, when Uriel Ventress and his ultramarine outlaws decided to wreck their shit on Medrengard. So Honsu's looking for means to get back at Uriel Ventress, and they come to this place where they nick this gene-modified virus MacGuffin, which apparently has this Heraclitus effect about it. And what it does is that it activates some sort of insanely rapid carcinogenous growth in plant life. So they load it into missiles and like missiles or torpedoes on this defensive platform above Tarsus Ultra, which they infiltrate, and basically send the missiles down to Tarsus Ultra, and this will set off the still present Tyrannid biostructures on Tarsus Ultra into some sort of overdrive, and it'll strip the planet in a matter of weeks. It's a very straightforward story about how they get this MacGuffin and they infiltrate the platform and blow it up. And it's just... And the one thing it actually does show is how wonderfully petty Honsu can be. How deliciously petty he is. The next story was a little bit longer. It was called The Skull Harvest. And you know that character in Warhammer 40k Black Library that is currently very overused? Huron Blackheart. And he features in the story, and Honsu and his friends go to New Barda to participate in the titular Skull Harvest to gather some forces for more vengeance on Ventress. And something that hadn't occurred to him in the Heraclitus Effect, it would seem that he needs like an army to be able to take on the entire Ultimate chapter. Well, as I said, Honsu is a bit dense. I blame the fact that he is mixed gene heritage, and that sounded sort of racist, but it's not. See, Honsu has gene seed from two different legions. He's half Iron Warrior and he's half Imperial Fist. And the biologist in me is a little bit confused how that would actually work, and one would not try to sort of get rid of the other. And does that mean that Honsu doesn't have a working Betcher's gland, or does it mean that he has got a working Betcher's gland and Sisam node? I try not to dwell on it too much because it makes my brain hurt. The Gary Stu feeling of him is sort of reduced because it's implied he's not the only one. He's just one of the most successful half-breeds. Anyway, Honsu and his merry band of murderers fight in the Skull Harvest, and it starts off basically sort of in a space bar, and then it's a space tournament a la Dragon Ball. And that to me is, in my experience, is always a sure sign of the author running out of ideas. One exception to that would be Naruto, because in Naruto the whole tournament thingy was a central theme to their education. There was a point to it. McNeill masks the whole tournament thing fairly well, but I'm still baffled as to why Euron Blackheart would have this in the first place. I mean, why? Why would he do that? He gains nothing from it. Entertainment, I guess. Anyway, Honsu wins the tournament and gets thousands of soldiers and many warbands to join him, and Euron just sort of lets him go. Now, if I'd been Euron Blackheart, I would have cracked his skull open and taken all those warriors for myself. But, there you go. Plot convenience. Next is actually more of a novella. Next story, and it was named Iron Warrior. Original. But we're back with Honsu and his horde, and they're actually doing a siege this time. It's better executed than Storm of Iron, and it mostly is because this is a much shorter book. It's like half the size of Storm of Iron, and it has about as much action going on in it. The Iron Warriors have located a Romilius-class star fortress, which apparently in its warp core houses the demon lord Umkar, which implies that Manius Calgar lied about having defeated Umkar, actually. The story is told from both the Imperial and Chaos perspective, just like in Storm of Iron, and it works fairly well here because it gives a good picture of the whole goings on. You're never left fumbling for what the heck is going on, man. And this story contains one of the single most awesome things I have read in 40k fiction to date. The Iron Warriors, when they failed to break open a bastion held by Ultramarines, I know, Ultramarines better than Imperial fists at siege work, le gasp. The Iron Warriors come to the conclusion that seeing as we are in space, and we can't bring cannons big enough to smash this open, why don't we just drop a flaming destroyer on top of the defenders, like in a 1 kilometer long starship? And they do. I mean, you can't blame it for efficiency. If all else fails, drop a ship on them. That breaks the deadlock, and the Chaos Host finally streams into the Starfort, and the end gets suitably tense as it turns out the Ultramarines were unaware of the demon enchained, and that an Inquisitor who's present, because nobody expects the Imperial Inquisition, brought with her an Eversor assassin. There is no bad end, really, as the newborn Vance and Honsu team up on the Eversor and basically punch its face in. It's glorious. The ending also has a demon lord possessing a dreadnought. That was cool. All in all, Iron Warrior shows that McNeill has grown a lot as a writer since Storm of Iron, keeping up the pace in the writing without any lulls in the action except where it's necessary for the aforementioned pacing, so that we can sort of gather momentum for the next phase full of awesome. Kadaris Grendel remains an uninteresting side character, and Honsu actually shows a Smith in the winter because he's the one who cooks up the whole drop a ship on them plan. Though Honsu's still far cry from Forex. Yes, I miss him. The next story is called The Iron Without, and it was previously unpublished. It's obviously alluding to Rob Sanders' The Iron Within, to the point where it actually outright quotes the Unbreakable Litany that Sanders cooked up for that one short story in the Horus Heresy series in the Age of Darkness anthology. And it takes place during the events of the chapters due, or just prior to it, during the invasion of Calf. And it's not as game-changing for Iron Warriors fluff as the short story The Iron Within. Sadly, we are introduced to the Iron Warrior Bronn, who happens to carry the exact same name as a certain favorite character of mine in A Song of Ice and Fire, but never mind. And Bronn was left behind on Calth when shit went belly up for Honsu, and the story is basically his memories of what happened. I got very attached to Bronn, much more than I ever was to Honsu throughout this entire omnibus. And has some golden moments in a so short story, especially in the banter between Honsu and Bronn and a third Iron Warrior named the Sadra. Honsu showed a pretty snarky sense of humor, and the others took him a little bit too literally. And that was kind of fun because it really shows that Honsu has a snarky sense of humor from his Imperial Fist side, obviously, and the others are just not picking up on it. What isn't as funny is a bit of technobabble that goes on, and Bronn and Honsu discuss entrenching tools. It starts with the entrenching tools, and then they go on talking about things that nobody cares about. And McNeill, whenever he does this, and he does it in all his books, Mechanicum was a particular culprit in this. And whenever that happens, I whisper to myself, reverse the polarity of the neutron flow. I know it's nitpicking, but it's basically where I'm sitting. It's reverse the polarity of the neutron flow and wibbly-wobbly timey-wimey. It would have gotten just as far ahead with wibbly-wobbly timey-wimey. I have to say, I enjoyed this short more than anything before, and that includes Iron Warrior, and it's because of Bronn. I like Bronn. It's a shame he died. Well, not really. It was obvious he was gonna die, but... And before anybody says it, I know he shows up in Angel Exterminatus. But at the moment I'm trying to ignore the fact that Angel Exterminatus and the Iron Warriors omnibus have actually anything to do with each other in any possible way, because it nearly ruined Storm of Ironborn. Okay? Now the final story is Beast of Calth. Now this follows after the events of the chapters due, and it details Honsu's escape from Calth. So if you ever thought Honsu was actually dead at the end of the chapters due, you're wrong. He'll turn up some other place because Graham McNeill just couldn't kill off a character. It tries this little bait and switch mystery story, but you have it figured out before the reveal. It's not that big a deal, really. In this story it becomes frighteningly obvious that Honsu hasn't really changed. He's still pretty much on square one, maybe on square two in terms of character development. He's still headstrong, he's still reckless, and he's frankly learned nothing the last 600 or so pages. And for a villain protagonist, that's just kind of weak. I don't know if it's stubbornness or what it is, but it's not good. What I came out feeling at the end of The Beast of Calth was that McNeill should have done the right thing. He should have killed his darling. It's obvious Honsu is a darling, and he should have killed him hard. And as I said, I'm trying to pretend that Angel Exterminatus does not connect with the Iron Warriors omnibus by Graham McNeill in any possible way. Because, well, frankly, somebody dropped it on me that the name of the Warsmith in the Storm of Iron was revealed in Angel Exterminatus, and I sort of went like, why? Why would you do that, McNeill? Why would you have these two stories linked together? Couldn't you just have had it be some sort of tiny bit part character? Are you meaning to say that basically nothing has happened with people like Kroger and Forex and Barb and Falk in all these years, in these thousands and thousands of years? Nothing in terms of characters happen. Are you meaning that I can put down Angel Exterminatus? I've seen people say this. You can put down Angel Exterminatus and pick up the Iron Warriors omnibus, and it's as if you're just reading a sequel. And that's a problem when you have thousands and thousands of years of action and warfare and a long war going on in between, and these characters obviously aren't changing very much beyond the Warsmith or Barb and Falk becoming more and more demonic. The Warsmith in Storm of Iron was deliciously alien. I love when the authors do the whole weirdy, warpy shit. But in this case, it was just, why? Why would you ruin a wonderfully terrifying character like that by giving him a name like Barb and Falk and making him this, as I've understood it, pretty whiny character? I've still to read Angel Exterminatus. I'm still playing catch up in Horus Heresy book series. Hopefully I get a better impression of Warsmith Falk. In the end, the Iron Warriors Omnibus has some great stuff in it. Iron Warrior, the novella, it's good. Storm of Iron, game changer for its time, and of course, The Iron Without. Great little story, but The Iron Without wouldn't have happened if it weren't for Rob Sanders' The Iron Within. That story, along with Warsmith Antioch, has become kind of a fan favorite, and for good reason, because it's a damn good story. McNeill is basically creating a good story on the shoulders of a damn good story. It's not that hard. But it's when he's on his own that you see that he doesn't actually have material for this. I don't know what to feel. I'm very conflicted about the Iron Warriors Omnibus. It has stuff in it that I really like. At the same time, I'm just like, why? You can do better. I know you can do better, so why didn't you? Okay, Storm of Iron gets off the hook because it's more than 10 years old now. He's become a better author. I can see that, but the Beast of Cow, I got.
Det finns bara krig.